What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. I am your host, Chris Raybon. This is your NFC 2023 schedule release podcast. Helping me break it down, as always, the Prime Minister of Degenerate Nation, Stucky. Stuck, how you feeling, brother?
Good, man. It's nice to talk to you again. We talked Friday, now Monday. It's that means I think we're like 120 days away or something.
Yeah, I think it's less than that. Yeah, we're less than that now, but yeah, it's coming. So
but still time to enjoy the summers, but it's nice to have a little break, but it's always nice to talk NFL, and before we know it, the grind will be here. So it's good to just kind of connect on where we stand after the schedule. If you haven't, I know I teased this last episode, but NFC episode's already out. After the
AFC's out. Yeah,
AFC's out. Sorry, we'll talk NFC today. And then if you missed before then, if you're just out of your routine, Raybon and Freeman did a draft recap episodes, and then Raybon and I did pre-draft previews talking about some division long shots. We'll touch on some of that again today when we talk NFC, but always nice to talk NFL.
Yes, sir. And I think the NFC is pretty interesting because there's a couple of divisions. I think that North and that South in the NFC that are pretty wide open. So curious to get your thoughts on that. But let's start with the NFC East, which could be real good again this year. I'm curious as to what you think about Philadelphia. I thought they had a pretty good draft. I think the schedule starts relatively easy at the Patriots, which is the Matt Patricia Bowl. Then the Vikings at home, at Tampa Bay, Washington at home, and at the Rams. So they have 5 winnable games that they'll should be favored in right out of the gate. But what do you think of Philly heading into 2023?
Yeah, I thought that they were going to be overvalued before any numbers came out. But it turns out, I project their win total is like 11 or 10.5 juice to the over, 11 under, around 10.7. Excuse me. Let me see. What do I have it at? Let me look at my updated numbers. Their win total is sitting right around 11, and I project them like 10.75. So I'm a little under, but not enough to play it. And my biggest, my worry with Philly is, and they have one of the most complete rosters, not only in the NFC but in the entire NFL. There's a lot of, you see these teams that lose the Super Bowl, they have a little bit of a hangover for whatever reason. I don't necessarily buy it because I can't. Why would the team that loses the Super Bowl? I think it's more coincidence anyway. But they have 2 new coordinators. There's a lot more tape on what they want to do with Hurts that these teams can look at in the offseason. So there's a lot of change. They're going to be younger on defense. So can they just avoid a slow start? Because if they do, they should get off to a really good start and then get rolling as the year progresses. But if they get off to a slow start, it could open up that division, because then that means that they're dropping a couple winnable games early on. And I actually have them with the easiest schedule in the division. Now, they're the best team in the division, but they finished in first. And relatively speaking, for a team that went to the Super Bowl, they have a pretty manageable schedule. They get a bye before the Chiefs game. The Chiefs also have a bye, for what it's worth, and then they do have a short week before the Bills, and then you have the Niners, then you're at the Cowboys, at the Seahawks. So the schedule gets tougher, after those first 5 or 6 weeks. So can they avoid, kind of a letdown, or just, some continuity issues with new coordinators and figuring some stuff out? We'll see. I project them right on. I think the other teams are more interesting. The Giants are a team I wanted to fade after what they did last year. It was all over on the over. They overperformed. They got pretty fortunate, I think, in general. But we talked about this before. It's kind of like there's a Vrabel. I think there's going to be a Vrabel effect with Dable. And I think that he's just, as a general rule of thumb, say he's there 10 years. Like, I think he's going to go over his win total like 7 or 8. And he's just going to overperform, because I think that he's a really good head coach. And they kind of have that intangible, those intangible factors are going to win more close games than they probably should. They're always going to exceed their Pythagorean wins. I just think that's how it's going to play out. But besides that, their schedule is brutal, because if you look at it, NFC teams only have 8 home games. Talked about this when we mentioned the Jets. One of the Giants' home games is against the Jets, and the Jets are coming off of a bye. And it's the Jets. Like, you could argue that, what is that, a half of a home game now? The Jets are coming off of a bye. So now you're down to like 7 home games. And then they play 3 straight road games in the middle of the season in the midst of a 9-week period where they play 7 road games. 7 road games in 9 weeks, all before a December bye. So yeah, it's a really tough schedule for the Giants. I show some value on their under, and then there's a tough schedule, but I just don't want to fade Dable here. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you because I think that's both of these teams, the Eagles and the Giants, were kind of like, all right, the Giants last year was the year to be on them, and Eagles too. Like we were both like, this team has a lot higher upside, but the Eagles roster is just so, I think it's such a high floor roster. I mean, even if Hurts goes down for a couple games, like Mariota, they had a above average offense in Atlanta with him starting like 15 games last year. So I don't doubt Philly would even be okay in that scenario. And then, yeah, the Giants, I thought they did a decent job addressing their needs in the draft. So, and they're also, Dable last year, they come in, him and Joe Shane, and they're just kind of cleaning house and just cobbling together a roster. They're going to kind of have more of their guys in their system. So, yeah, the Giants are just going to make things, I think it's just going to kind of pull things together make things like muck things up in this division, because Dallas is also, I think, really good. So it's a division where overall, I look at a team like Washington, and if Washington was in like the North or the South, you'd say, okay, Washington, maybe they have a shot if they get their quarterback thing together. They have Howell overperforms, or Brissett has another Cleveland-like season, but like it just makes Washington, it's tough to see Washington do anything in this division. But overall, in terms of like the Eagles still look pretty good if you're looking for a team to win the Super Bowl or win the NFC. Like the Eagles still look great. I think the Giants, their ceiling, I don't think they could beat Philly, although they do. Interesting with the Giants, they get Philly twice in the last 3 weeks, and that the Giants benefited from that last year. I believe Philly was kind of resting guys, so maybe that's like one of the only positives for the Giants schedule. But overall, yeah, I think the fact that the Giants could overperform things makes it tough, because I think Philly's really good, and I think Dallas is really good. But if the Giants steal a couple games here and there, or they're winning games, I don't know if this division may have 3 playoff teams again if that's the case.
Yeah, it's not going to be as easy for the Eagles. Target on their back now, and the schedule's just a lot harder. I mean, If you look at their schedule last year, it was a joke who they played, even into the playoffs. You get to play like San Fran without a quarterback and the Giants to get to the Super Bowl. It's not going to be as easy this year from start to finish, but I still think that they are the class of the NFC. The Dallas is an interesting case in that I don't know where they're headed from I don't like what I'm hearing from an offensive coordinator perspective and what McCarthy wants to do. I don't know. I'm a little fearful there. And if you look at their schedule for a team that didn't win the division, and it's like, all right, they have a bye week before the Rams at home. And like, that's probably the only gimme home win. Like, I don't consider any division game a gimme. Other than that, it's like, look at the schedule. They're at the Panthers. They're like, so some of they're at the Cardinals. Now, the good thing is they could get the Cardinals and the 49ers that within the first 5 weeks. We don't know when Purdy's going to be ready. I doubt Kyler Murray will be ready for week 3. So that helps them that they'll go to Arizona with presumably a backup quarterback. So yeah, 3 of their first 4 opponents on the road are out west. So they do a lot of traveling early before their bye week. It's not a really easy schedule. And then like you look later in the year, it's like, Seattle, Philly, at Buffalo, at Miami, home against Detroit, at Washington. Like there's not a lot of breaks in this schedule. It does help that you get Arizona and San Fran early. I'm right on with my projections. And then with Washington, I'm also pretty spot on. The one thing worth noting with Washington is they're one of a handful of teams that does not play anybody coming off of a bye. So they don't, I think Chicago is another team that fits that mold as well. But I'm right on. My numbers are spot on with everyone in the NFC East as far as far as win total projections, except for the Giants. I show value in their under, and their schedule is brutal, but I don't really want to fade Dable. I'm not sure I want to, although look, I'm not sure I want to take a shot at anyone in the division. Curious if you do. I'll go back to my stat. No one has won the division in back-to-back years since 2004. So can the Eagles buck that trend?
I think they can, like, just,
Well,
like,
obviously they can, but
yeah,
are
but
they? Or
I
is there
think
any value in somewhere else?
I do think they will, only because, or like, I don't see as much value in anyone else because, I think when you look at like, okay, division futures, like, I want a pretty clear, like, 2-team race. And like you said, I think the Giants muck things up a little too much. Like, I still think the Eagles and Cowboys are better, but not so much better that the Giants couldn't factor in. At least, not at this point. There could be injuries and things that happen with these depth charts, and that could clarify some things. But as of now, this division is, for me, I don't really see much value in it because, like, I'm pretty spot on with the numbers. Washington's win total 6.5, so I don't, that's pretty low. I don't necessarily see a ton of value in going under that. I think that's around where it should be, but it just kind of mucks things up to where I don't see a ton of value. But I do see these teams being competitive. Like, I don't see the Giants going from like whatever they were last year to like a 4 or 5 wins again. Even if they have that tough schedule, I still see them being in contention, and I see Cowboys doing what they do. I really like their defense. And then the Eagles, yeah, like I said, even if they have a backup, I think they'll still be able to win games. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough in this division. I think this is probably the most, I would say, accurately projected division in the market, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. The Eagles, I wanted to fade them. Like, I was like, all right, they're probably at the peak of their value. They got really fortunate with their schedule and injuries last year. And now you have new coordinators, target on their back, schedule gets harder, but it's just not there from a numbers perspective. One final note on the NFC East. It will be interesting to watch the offenses from a scheme perspective. We have new coordinators in Dallas, Philly, and Washington, new offensive coordinators. There's 16 new offensive coordinators across the league. Right? Half the teams have new offensive coordinators. And then from the Giants' perspective, Giants are the only team in the division with no changes on the staff. How does the league, and specifically the division, adjust to what Dable did with Jones? What do you like from a very high level, simplistic perspective? He simplified everything for Jones, right? Like, just made his reads very easy, narrowed it down to one side of the field, and kind of, put training wheels on him, and then, kind of accentuated his strengths. And I mean, it was brilliant what he did, but he wasn't using like the entire field. So you have a whole offseason to look at what Dable was doing last year with Jones and that offense. So there's going to be some adjustments, and we're going to see how Dable and company can make their counter adjustments. And then we'll see the effect of all these other new offensive coordinators throughout the divisions. That's something I'll be watching early on, but I agree. It's pretty fairly priced divisional market.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice if we knew who would start at receiver for the Giants, because that depth chart, like, it's like it could go any which way at this point. So yeah, that's tough. But let's talk the NFC North, because I think this one's a really interesting one. I know you liked Green Bay, and then I think I like Chicago, but I also like Detroit a lot. I think the hype is warranted. The more I look at this team and this roster, I think they can be competitive, and I think they're one of the few teams that, the NFC is kind of jumbled, as people can probably tell. I think there's Philly, and there's San Francisco, and there's Dallas. Like, in Dallas, probably not even on that elite tier yet. They could get there, but after those three, I think Detroit, like, if there was a team to kind of jump up into that double-digit win tier, and be kind of legit from start to finish, I think Detroit could be it. So curious as to what you think here, but Detroit, they don't. One thing we talk about with the Lions is Goff, who under the radar, I think even he was good last year, but like, I didn't realize just how well he was in a lot of these metrics. He was top 5 in QBR and all the yards per attempt metrics and things like that. So, the biggest thing with him going on the road into cold weather. Well, 4 of their last 6 games are on the road, are the Lions, but at New Orleans, that's indoors. At Chicago, that's outdoors. But Minnesota indoors, Dallas indoors. So and their Green Bay games in week 4. So I think the schedule makers did them some favors. I know they start with KC, which could be a loss, but Overall, I think the schedule makers did the Lions some favors here. What do you think?
Yeah, but I think that if you're gonna start at KC, do it in week one because number one, that's a road game ahead of everyone else, and then you get extended time before another NFC competitor in Seattle. You'll have 10 days before that game. And yeah, you mentioned it. Week 9 bye, which is I like, it's right in the middle of the schedule. And then after the week 9 bye, one cold weather game, which is always important. If you look at the numbers historically with Goff, and it's at the Bears.
Yep.
That's very good for Goff. They also get the Broncos on Denver's third straight road game. Mentioned the extended rest before Seattle in week 2. They get the Bucks and the Bears after byes. That's not terrible. So I think that the schedule, is fairly favorable. But I think that whereas we'll get to the NFC West, a lot of the teams got shafted in the NFC West of the schedule. A lot of the teams in this division, I think, made out with their schedule. We'll talk about. I mean, I think the Lions look. The hype is warranted. I do think they're a tad overvalued coming into the season. I project them at like 9-ish wins, 9-9-1. There's still some holes on this defense. And it's not an easy schedule overall. So I show a little bit of value on the other, not a ton. But I do think that, they could easily, by the end of the season, I could see them being the second rated, from a power ratings perspective, the second highest rated team in the NFC for sure. Do think they're a little overvalued, not much. I still think that the Bears, we'll get to your boys, I have them as, let's see, the Bears win total like 7.7, 7.8, accounting for juice. I have them projected only around 7-1. So I show significant value, or enough, I should say, enough value to bet their win total under. However, this schedule, you want to talk about a schedule? I think that the Bears won the schedule lottery out of any team in the NFC. And I'll explain why. They have number one, they get, they have 2 short weeks. So they play 2 Thursday games, but both are at home. Or no, excuse me. One's against Washington.
One's on the road. Yeah. And a repeat of that one. It was like at the same time.
The ugliest game ever.
Yeah,
ugliest game ever. And then one's against Carolina. But, so you have a 2 Thursday games. And they play no teams off of bye, as I mentioned before. After those Thursday games, they play the Vikings, divisional game. So you get 10 days before then. Then they play the Lions on the road, divisional game, 10 days before that. Their bye week is also before their other matchup with the Lions, divisional game. So their extended rest happens before 3 divisional games. Also, they have almost 2 weeks more rest than their opponents. That is tied for the most since the 2002 division realignment. The most was they're tied with the Bills last year and the 2011 Lions, the 2011 Lions went 10-6 and made the playoffs. So their schedule sets up really, really favorable, I think. But it's not from an opponent. If you look at their road schedule, it's pretty tough. I mean, like outside of the Bucks in week 2, you're at the Chiefs, you're at Washington on a short week, at the Chargers, at the Saints. And I'm talking non-divisional games, at the Browns. So it's not an easy schedule, but from a rest perspective and when the rest happens, man, I think it really, the schedule makers did the Bears a lot of favors that they can take advantage of here. I'll make the case for the Packers in the division next, but we'll kind of transition into your Bears love here. You like the Bears for the division.
Yeah, I mean, I like them a lot less after looking at the Lions more. Like, I still think that the Bears, and Packers, have a shot. Really, the team I'm out on is Minnesota, and I think that's what it is more than anything now. It's like, I still like the Lions. I think the Lions, have the most upside in this division by far. I think they could be an elite team as soon as this year. They were already a top 5 offense last year, and I think their defense is going to be a lot better. But the Bears, I mean, we've talked about this. The schedule is not daunting at all. I think they're going to take a big step forward on offense. You get Justin Fields, a guy like DJ Moore. I mean, we've seen, Josh Allen gets Stephon Diggs. Jalen Hurts gets AJ Brown. Like, guys usually take a jump when they get these kind of guys, even though a lot of people will look at them and say, oh, it's probably just going to be a downgrade for the receiver. But I think their offense will be a lot better. I think their offensive line will be good. I think, or a lot better. I think their defense will be a lot better than last year. I know you still have some questions about the line, but I mean, this was like a league worst defense last year. I think it'll be a lot closer to average, just depending on, how much of a step, if any, they're, some of those young guys in the secondary take. But no, I agree with the Packers too. I think the Packers, it wasn't like Aaron Rodgers was great last year. He had one of his worst seasons. He was battling an injury. They were a very average team. So the issue now, though, is just, with these division odds, the more I look at it, I know Detroit's not like an overwhelming favorite, but the more I look at it, I just see the same amount of upside, in Detroit as I do in taking one of these teams like Green Bay or Chicago. And it's Minnesota that I really want to fade, in one way or another. Because I mean, this team, they went 13-4. Their Pythagorean wins was 8.4 because they had a negative point differential. Their DVOA estimated wins was 6.3. They were 26 overall, below average everything, offense, defense, special teams. If you adjust, they have their luckiest team in the history of the NFL. They had 11 one-score wins, literally an NFL record, 11-1 in one-score games. You adjust that to 6-6, which is always what you expect in one-score games, and they're 8-9 team. So every metric that wasn't their actual win-loss record, like every predictive underlying metric says this team was below average. I don't think they got better. I know they signed Davenport, but they lose Tomlinson, and then they trade Smith. The offense has kind of been, it didn't, even though O'Connell's an offensive guy, it wasn't more efficient last year. It was just, Jefferson doing Jefferson things, but Cousins kind of regressed in terms of efficiency. So I'm at the point now where it's more about just, I'm trying to find ways to fade Minnesota early in the year. I still think they're a little bit overvalued. And I like all these other teams to kind of exceed expectations, but there's not as much value in the division because I think Detroit is actually a pretty viable favorite.
Yeah, I still like the Packers. I mean, I'm lower. I agree on the Vikings, so I'm lower than the market on the Vikings. Not as much as like we would have been like 10 years ago because everyone knew it was kind of fraudulent. But their win total with accounting for juice is like 8-6. I project them at 8 wins on the dot. They have a middle of the pack schedule. Like I think I have them at the 17th part of schedule. Whereas I have the Packers with the 3rd easiest, the Bears with the 5th easiest, Lions 10th easiest. The thing with the Bears, I still think the Bears are one season away. I like some of the moves they're doing. I still have questions about the offensive line. I still have questions about the secondary, the defensive line. People are making too much about like linebackers. Like linebackers are not that important. That was their biggest moves, and it's like let Poles cook. It's like, all right, he got rid of one linebacker and he brought in 2 more for the same price, but they're not going to make that much of an impact. I still have questions about the cornerback position, and I don't know if Fields they are so reliant on Fields' legs, and their defense is bad, and we saw this last year. Like, can he stay healthy across a whole schedule? And because if not, they don't. Who's their backup? PJ Walker? Like it gets bad quick. Is Peterman still there? We're gonna just get like we don't know who's starting.
I think both of them are there.
The game again.
Yeah.
And so I do show a little bit of value in the Bears. Their schedule's really favorable. But because I'm lower on the Vikings, I'm a little lower on the Lions, and I'm a little lower on the Bears. By default, I'm also higher than the market on Green Bay. And when I look at their schedule, it's going to come down to Jordan Love, right? And like it's a quarterback league. There's a lot of uncertainty there, which is why I'd like, instead of going like the win total over, they have the lowest, the best odds and the highest odds to win the division.
Yeah, the longest.
So the longest odds. That's why I like the upside there because of the uncertainty with Love, right? And I would rather the distribution of results, I think, are wider for the Packers compared to the Bears. If you remove injury risk, we kind of know what we saw. Fields flashes potential. We know who Cousins is, and we know who Goff is. Quarterback league. We don't really know who Love is. I think that he was learning under Rodgers. The small snippets that we saw, I kind of liked some of the things that I saw. but we're still guessing, right? We have a very tiny sample size. But when I look at the schedule, you have an inexperienced quarterback, and weeks 1 through 9 for the Packers, that's the easiest stretch before, you're at Case, you're home against Case. You have the Lions on the road, but let me take that back. Weeks 1 through 9 are their easiest stretch by far, which is what you want with an inexperienced quarterback. Maybe build some confidence, win some winnable games, because then, you're starting week 10, you're at the Steelers, home against the Chargers, at the Lions, at home against the Chiefs, at the Giants on a short week, or they're coming off extended rest. So that's a tough stretch. So if it goes south early, then it's going to get really ugly for the Packers. But with an inexperienced quarterback, I like how the schedule sets up with a lot of their winnable games early on, have an early bye to kind of reset, look at some things before the schedule gets tougher. So yeah, it's also a manageable road schedule. Like, you look at here's the road schedule outside of the division, at Atlanta, at the Raiders, at Denver, after a bye, at Pittsburgh, at the Giants, at the Panthers. Like, all those games, if Love is okay, are winnable. I still like the offensive line. I like the potential wide receiver. The defense still has a lot of potential. I do wish they kind of shook it up from a coordinator perspective. But yeah, I think that there's value in the Packers to win the division due to and I'd rather go there than, even though I show value in the win total, because of the uncertainty with Love. I like how the schedule sets up. Even that Chiefs game, like, if Love is okay, like, you want to talk about a brutal spot in the Chiefs schedule. Here's the Chiefs. They go to London, and they go to Denver in altitude after the Chargers game. Then they go to London, play Miami. They get their bye, and then it's Super Bowl rematch against the Eagles on the road for the Raiders in Vegas. And then before a home game against the Bills, they're going up to Lambeau, and the Packers have, I believe, 10 days before that game. They play on a Thursday the week before. That's a tough spot. Like, just situationally, if Love's okay, could be a game where the Chiefs slip up on the road. So I don't mind the schedule. I'm going to take a shot on the Packers to win the division over the win total.
I don't mind it. I don't mind it because I think what will happen is, I think as the season draws near, I think all those the teams behind the Lions, I think their odds will even out a little bit in terms of the division. So I think the Packers' odds are only going to get shorter, because I do think that it's kind of jumbled up in there. And yeah, I mean, I don't like Barry either, and they did finish 9th in pass defense DVOA. So I mean, their run defense was just horrible. 31st. I feel like that's been an issue at times for them. But if you can stop the pass, that's still what you need to do. I thought the one thing about the Vikings, that the one thing I think I do like about the Vikings is they got rid of Donatel, a defensive coordinator, and they got Brian Flores. I don't, there's deeper issues on the Vikings than just needing to change the defensive coordinator. But I mean, it's anything's got to be better than Donatel, because those schemes are just so you just knew teams are going to go off on them when they played them. It wasn't even close. So I think
the defense still has holes for sure, major holes, but from a coordinator perspective, I'll give them a little bump just for the schematic upgrade that I'm anticipating, and we'll see if Flores can work some magic, because that will certainly do wonders for Minnesota if they could just they kind of patch up and hide some of the roster deficiencies with some a schematic bump with bringing in Flores. I did like that move a lot.
Yeah, but overall, I mean, I'm still down on Minnesota because, again, they were pretty much a slightly below average team last year. They got super lucky. They didn't really get better or get better on the roster because they're kind of cap strapped, which is one of the reasons they traded Smith. And so you're really relying on, some guys like Evans and Booth, some of those corners to take a step forward. You still got holes at pretty much almost every level, except, maybe linebackers not an issue, but yeah, that defense, if Flores doesn't have talent, I mean, it could still be a problem. So still down in Minnesota.
Same.
All right, let's go to the NFC South. And the Saints are the favorite, I don't think the Saints should be favored. I like taking a shot at somebody else in this division. I like the Falcons. I could see if you're super high on Bryce Young, maybe you like the Panthers, but I just don't think the Saints team is going. It's kind of the default team, just kind of locked in here. But I think there's reasons to be concerned. Number one, Derek Carr switching offenses. Everyone's kind of looking at him as, okay, now they got a quarterback. It's the weak division. There's a real decent chance. I don't think he's not an upgrade this year on Dalton, because if you look at Derek Carr, every time he's gone to a new offense, it's been his 4 worst seasons in terms of almost every efficiency metric. He's never had a winning season in one of those seasons. And, we saw this last year going to just staying on the Raiders and going to a new offense. It wasn't pretty. And that was with Devontae Adams, throwing to him 160 times. So, I don't know if that's a sure thing, given how, Dalton was pretty solid. I think they lost some guys on their defense. They lost a defensive coach to the Falcons. Dennis Allen has his winning percentage for his career is 28%, never exceeded his win total. So I don't trust the Saints team as a front runner. So kind of by default, I like the Falcons. But what do you think of the Saints?
Yeah, not super high on the Saints. I do have them projected as the favorite. I have them projected. Their win totals like sitting at 9.3, counting for juice. I'm really close to 10 because their schedule is, based on my numbers, is the easiest projected strength of schedule I've ever had in my numbers, my projections. But right behind there is the Falcons. And if you just go by pure winning percentage from last year, opponent winning percentage, which is a very flawed way to do it, but it's the easiest strength of schedule since 2018. And the other thing I like about the Falcons is good bye week.
Yep.
Chance that all their games fall on Sundays, so you get like into a nice rhythm. They don't have a bye after London, but that's one of their road games. So you get the Jags on a neutral instead of on the road. 6 of their first 8 games are against inexperienced quarterbacks. 4 of their first 6 are at home, with 1 game at neutral. You could also see the Cardinals pre-Murray. It's week 10. That'll be iffy. It's before the Cardinals bye. They face the Saints twice after their bye week, which I think the Falcons have more potential to get better as the year goes on. So I actually like that for their division. Last year, I projected them as dogs of more than a touchdown in 9 games. This year, 0. Have them favored in 8. Love them for the division. I still hate that they didn't. I wish they would have gotten like a major edge rusher, but the last 2 years they've had 21 and 17 sacks, like embarrassing. And then 91, and last year 105 pressures. But they went out. They got Calais Campbell, consistent. He's getting older. Onyemata, Goldman. They still have Grady Jarrett, Lorenzo Carter, like all these guys, Bud Dupree.
Like they have enough guys to cobble together a pass rush.
Yeah,
like,
so if you take all those guys together, they're new. So last year they had 21 sacks and 90 pressures. So you take everyone on their roster now and look at their numbers last year, they would have 38 sacks, which matches their total the last 2 years combined, and 166 pressures, almost doubles their amount of pressures that are on the roster. Now, it's flawed in some way just with playing time, but they have enough to, and I like the potential of their secondary. I think they have enough there to find something. Because it doesn't really matter how good your secondary is in the NFL if you just have 0 pass rush whatsoever.
And let me speak to that, because this is an underrated reason why I like the Falcons. So they go out and they get this guy, defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen. Now, probably nobody's heard of him. First-time defensive coordinator. This is the guy who was coaching the Saints defensive line for over the last half decade. And then he got promoted to assistant head coach. I think one year he was assistant DC as well, but he's widely respected for having, the Saints, I think, have the second most sacks over the last, whatever his tenure was. And he's widely renowned around the league for developing defensive lines. And this is we talk about this every year with the Falcons. It's they put nobody around Jarrett. And this is the first year where I'm just looking at the roster and the moves they made. And I can actually see an emphasis on that. So there's a chance that this, it's not just the talent they brought in, but the fact that it's just Dean Pease is gone. Remember, he was like a late 70s. I think the game unfortunately kind of passed him by a little these last 2 years. So this is in a winnable division like this where the Falcons already had the best offense last year. That was Mariota started 15 games. Kyle Pitts missed the last 6-7 games of the year. They still had the best offense in the division. Tom Brady played every game. I know teams had injuries, but like overcoming Marcus Mariota and missing your best receiver for the most explosive receiver for the 7 games, that's still pretty impressive. So like, I'm not worried about their offense. I think their offense gets even better with Robinson. The line is still good. I think they still have 2 meh quarterbacks, but it's not going to be any worse than last year, I think. So yeah, I really like the Falcons. I think the Saints are just a little bit. I think the Saints are overrated. I think the Saints, they're just kind of in this spot because, yeah, like you said, their schedule is going to be easy on paper. But like I said, Dennis Allen has always underperformed expectations in a variety of ways. Like he's bad as a favorite. He's bad as a dog. He's bad in the win total department. And the Saints team, besides that, like they're kind of middling, and Carr's always had problems in his first year of the new spot or in a new offense. So I think one way or another, I still want to fade the Saints. I know you got the win total 10, but I'm not a buyer in the Saints at all.
I'm with you on Falcons for the division. One of my favorite division bets. It's all it is. It's numbers because on paper, and if you look, this half of the Saints schedule could be first-time starters playing first-time starters at quarterback. I mean, they're four of their first 6 are on the road, but look at their first 6 weeks. Home against Tennessee. Could they technically have Levis? Maybe. I don't know. Because they could have a rookie quarterback starting his first game, which is always a disaster. At the Panthers is their next game. Could have a rookie quarterback. At the Packers, could have a first-time starter. Home against the Bucks, it could be a first-time starter. Could be Baker Mayfield. At the Patriots, you get Mac Jones. Who knows? Maybe it's not Mac Jones then. At the Texans, you get a rookie quarterback. And then you're at the Jags. Then if you look at and then they're at the Colts, could be a rookie quarterback. If you look at all their road games, like here are the road games: Panthers, Packers, Patriots, Texans, Colts, Vikings, Falcons, Rams, and Bucks. Like there is not a single so from a numbers perspective, you can see how I have them close to 10. Like there's not a single their road schedule on paper is a joke, and they could face like nine first time or rookie quarterbacks. But yeah, I'm not rushing to buy the Saints, and I only have them favored by more than a touchdown, for example, in one game, home against the Bucks. So it's not like they're like all these games they're going to be 10, 11 point favorites.
That's kind of my.
I like. Yeah.
Oh no, I was gonna say that's kind of my thing with New Orleans. It's like one of those deals where it's like their schedule looks good on paper now.
It was like the Colts last year.
But like they also, like a lot of the teams you mentioned, like for example, like to play devil's advocate, like we like Tennessee. You like Green Bay a lot. Like Tampa Bay, I mean, their roster outside of the court, man, if they get the quarterback figured out, it's like a lot of these teams, it's like we could look at it and say the Saints have an easy schedule, but in reality, I'm like higher on a lot of the teams they play and lower on them. So I'm almost looking at it, well, like a lot of these teams have, like the Saints on their schedule is not an intimidating home game either. You know what I mean? And like, listen, man, like I just know. The Colts
very similar to the Colts last year.
I just know division. Better.
New quarterback, Matt Ryan, new veteran quarterback. The schedule comes in as like the easiest.
It's hard to do that in year one. Like it's hard to just have that guy come in and like the Rams did it, but not everybody can do that.
Yeah. Carolina was intriguing to me. I didn't love their offseason. And I think the Falcons have just a little bit more potential, and I believe you can get a little better price.
Yep. Well, no, they're kind of they flip-flopped, I believe.
Even. Have they?
Let's see. FanDuel has the Falcons. Now the Falcons are in second for the division at plus 260, and the Panthers are plus 350, which I think is fair. I think the Falcons should be. I mean, I think the Falcons are right there with the Saints. Honestly, like I have them rated a lot more similarly than probably the market does. So, but yeah, the Panthers are plus 350.
Yeah, I like that. The Bucks, I'm not. I mean, it's Baker Mayfield. I'm not a believer, and it's an aging roster. I'm not a believer in the Bucks. Yeah, I mean Carolina, I also don't love. I have it on paper again. They're in the NFC in this division. I have them with the third easiest schedule. The Falcons with the second, the Saints with the first, Bucks with like the sixth. I don't like how. And look, I'm actually a Bryce Young believer and buyer. Although I'm also a believer that no one really knows how quarterbacks are going to pan out. But the rookie quarterbacks, they're hard to trust in their first year. Just as a blanket statement, look against the spread, win totals, regardless. And we don't even know if he's going to start right off the bat. I think he will, but we'll see. He's right in OTAs. He's not number 2, but it's not a given. But it's hard to trust rookie quarterbacks right away. And I don't love how their schedule played out. You got 2 short weeks. They're both before road games, at Seattle and at Chicago on a Thursday and a Sunday. Their bye week is, semi early, and it's kind of wasted before a home game against the Texans. 3 straight road games later in the season. So, yeah. And by the way, that bye before the Texans are also off of a bye. Don't really love the schedule. Can't really trust the rookie quarterback. I know Desmond Ridder didn't look good last year, but he's got a full season of reps, and it's really like a rush-based offense. And it's hard. I'm not a Desmond Ridder guy, but they don't ask him to do a lot. And we see a lot of quarterbacks from year 1 to year 2. You can expect some improvement. He's got all off season, so we'll see how he does. And there's other options there if he just completely flops. But it's not like they're going to be asking him to do a ton. And Tampa, I just can't trust their quarterback either. And they got a first place schedule and lost Tom Brady. 6 of 8 on the road at one point, culminating in a cold weather trip to Green Bay in December. Not an easy stretch for that team. So yeah, I think it's all about the Falcons. I agree with you. Falcons division for me.
Yeah, like I think they're another team that I think Detroit is ahead of them because I think Goff has already shown that he can, with the right pieces around him, perform at a very high level efficiency wise. He's even gotten to a Super Bowl, whereas these guys not going to happen with Ritter or Heineke for that matter. But yeah, in this division, they could do it. Panthers would still be my second choice. There's still some upside with Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Evero should be a good defensive coordinator, even though that defense, could kind of go either way. The talent is okay. Some guys had down years. We'll see. The line should there's a lot of things that could kind of go either way with the Panthers. The thing about their offseason was they made a lot of changes, but a lot of the changes they didn't really get better. Like a lot of them were just lateral moves. So and then you're just bringing in a whole new staff, and it could take a while in Carolina.
With all those changes with a rookie quarterback, it's not
an
easy ask. I actually show value on the Bucks, on the Tampa under, and I might end up playing it, but we'll see. I'll do my win total later. I'll do my win total piece later in the season.
It's a bit early for win totals because they're just like normal bets, so it's
it's no real holding money for that long.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I think the Bucks are kind of a wait and see for me because like the roster, they obviously had terrible injury luck last year, which I think the position they had injury luck at, the offensive line combined with Brady's age. I mean, that offense was just bad at times. And, on defense, they had injuries. I think like there is some upside here, but it's like, what are they going to do at quarterback? Like, is there some type of, is anything going to emerge? Is it just going to be Baker? They also got the guy who, one of the coaches who was credited with turning Geno around. So there's always a chance Baker is like back to serviceable Baker. Maybe I don't have high hopes, but I mean, it's always possible. He did have some okay years when he wasn't just flat out terrible like he was last year. So I think Tampa's still a wait and see for me. Like they have enough talent around them in this division to where, if they were still in last, with the longest odds and, we're hearing better things about Mayfield or the offense, I might be interested in sniffing around there just because I think, they're going to kind of be slept on. No one's really giving them any love, but this is a very winnable division, I think.
We'll see if the Bucks. We see if the Bucks also can get improved with their offensive coordinator, like just better play calling, and they would run it way too much early and just and Brady bailed them out in a couple games, but there was definitely some injuries. So yeah, maybe there's some upside with the Bucs offense, but I don't trust Baker or Trask or whoever it would be. NFC what's left? NFC West.
So we got the Niners.
What would you anticipate? So like the question, one of the major questions is with and by the way, I mentioned some of the teams that I think the Bears had a really good schedule. They don't play anyone off of a bye. Two teams, Washington also doesn't. By the way, Washington also has about close to 2 weeks. They have the 5th most rest advantage over the past 21 years, or the Commanders, if you're looking for a reason to like them. I think the schedule makers, I think, did them a ton of favors as well from a pure rest perspective. Not the case with the NFC West. The Rams and the 49ers play 4 teams off of a bye. Now, from a numbers perspective, if you just run it out, it's like worth, buys worth like a half a point. So it's worth like 0.15 wins over the course of the year if you play 4 teams coming off of a bye compared to a team that played 0. And which is Arizona. Arizona doesn't play. That's the only good thing I could say about Arizona. We don't know when Murray's going to come back, which is a huge thing. Like I would think, first of all, we'll start with Arizona. I think that this is a lost year for them. Their defense could be historically bad. I wouldn't be surprised if they trade some of their pieces. This is a full tank mode. Gannon, long-term rebuild. They could have the first 2 picks in the draft next year. I don't have them favored in any games. The roster's bad. I think it's just a throwaway year, which means like I don't think that they're going to rush Murray back, whether Murray's their franchise quarterback or they trade him. Like, I think that he comes back maybe week 15 after the bye for the last 4 weeks. Maybe if they're in it, like if they're 5-1 or something, he would come back earlier. But I don't think there's any reason to rush him back. I think that they're like not, indirect tank mode. I think they're the worst team in the NFL, but they have the best schedule just from how everything broke. We'll start with San Francisco. They have another quarterback. That's why this division's tough. When's Murray coming back? And then when is Purdy coming back? If it's not him, Lance. And what do we think of Lance? So there's quarterback uncertainty there.
Could be Darnold. From what I'm hearing.
But yeah, could be Darnold too. So there's a lot of quarterback uncertainty throughout this division. New coordinators, new coaches, everywhere kind of except Seattle. But San Fran has 4 teams coming off a bye. Cleveland, Cincy, Jacksonville, and then Arizona late, who could have Murray back for week 15. Like, you don't get a break there. They also play Seattle at home in week 14 when Seattle was off a Thursday night game with 10 days before. So, like, from a rest perspective, San Fran got shafted. They also have 2 straight games on the road to start the year when they do have those quarterback questions. It's tough. They've had bad injury luck, but that's been a theme for 10 years.
Yeah.
Like average 10 years, this is like something you could just kind of anticipate with San Francisco. I don't know what the hell is going on there. But yeah, I think the quarterback uncertainty with San Francisco. Schedule is brutal. Rams also just a terrible roster overall.
Defense, they lost their entire defense except Aaron Donald. It's wild.
Horrendous. The Arizona and the Rams D's are so bad.
Like Arizona's defense is like Aaron Donald included. Arizona's defense right now is probably better than the Rams. Like that's how like they literally did nothing in free agency, lost I think like over half their starters, pretty much all of their starters except Donald, and replaced them with like day 3 picks and undrafted free agents. Like their defense could legit be bad this year.
Yeah, and Rams, like brutal start to the season. They're, like I said, they're one of 2 teams to get 4 teams off a bye. Steelers, Cowboys, Ravens, and Washington off of a bye. They start at Seattle, home against San Fran. Now, maybe there's quarterback questions there. Then you're at Cincy, at Indy on a short week, home against Philly. Like those first 5 weeks, like your hardest game, your easiest game is at Indy. And that's the 2nd straight road game on a short week. And, you finish 3rd in your division and you get the Eagles, Bengals, Ravens, and Cowboys as part of your non-divisional slate. 4 trips out east, although I assume they'll stay out east for Cincy, Indy back-to-back. But it's a brutal early season schedule. And then you got these 4 teams coming off buys. I don't like where the Rams are headed. From a pure numbers perspective, this is just a really tough division for me to crack because of the quarterback uncertainty. I want to bet the Cardinals under. It's super low, though. And we don't know when Murray's coming back. I just think that they're in full tank mode. I wouldn't be surprised if they trade guys like Hopkins and Baker and anyone that's like worth a shit. And I think they're just fully rebuilding. Gannon wants to just redo the culture. It's just all fixing everything that Kingsbury was. The facilities, the culture, the schemes, everything. And then the compiled draft picks for next year. I show a little bit of value in under in the Rams. But, with the uncertainty when Mary's coming back, with the 49ers doing a quarterback, from just a pure, like, I know what I'm going to get. It's like Seattle jumps out. They're one of, like, I think 4 or 5 teams that doesn't have a new coach, coordinator, or quarterback. Love what they did in the draft. They addressed some of their needs. Last year, they were the team that faced the most. They got the most if you look from a EPA perspective, they faced the toughest schedule of opposing quarterbacks. And their secondary performed really well with some of the youth there. I love what they did in the draft. So is this Seattle? Is this just with all the uncertainty, it's tough, but is this a play on Seattle for the division?
Yeah, I played them already. I like Seattle because I think they stand out, if San Francisco falters. And San Francisco's actually never won the division back-to-back years in the Shanahan era. So, I mean, it's like you said, it's these injuries for San Francisco that tend to come in waves. And I already see San Francisco's a little vulnerable at spots. Like, I know they – the skill positions are great, but I do have some questions about, can their line hold up? Yeah, like interior wise, they, those Banks and Burford and, Feliciano, that's kind of questionable. Williams is a year old. He never plays a full season. And, you never know when, that could start coming to end because he's like been their anchor. He's been like one of the best linemen in the NFL. So, if he misses any significant time, I don't know if they're built to kind of overtake it. I didn't like what they did in the draft. They went with what did they go backup tight end? They had a kicker early. They didn't even pick till round 3.
And drafted a kicker.
Yeah, so they got a lot of, this team they have more downside than upside. I think, especially when you start going from where they were last year, and then you say, well, the guy, Purdy's like the guy who he was able to hold it down. Will you get that out of Lance or Darnold if Purdy has to miss time? Like at some point. All this stuff is going to catch up to them. And I just don't like how it started. Now, again, the skill positions are going to be really good. So, this might be a team just to fade, against the spread or something like that. Cause I think they'll still be a little overvalued there, but yeah, I think Seattle is definitely the way to go. Seattle has a lot of ways that I think they can improve from last year. I mean, they got Bobby Wagner. He's been really good. That should help their run D, the secondary, they got Witherspoon, at corner, so they could have a really strong secondary. Pair him with Woolen. You got Adams coming back. You still got Diggs. I think the defense got better. I think the line should take a step forward. They got those young tackles going into year 2. Usually see improvement from them. It's it's just a really solid all around team. Obviously, if Geno were to go down, not ideal. You got Locke. I mean, he started NFL games. Maybe it's not the worst thing. This team is not really built around the quarterback, but yeah, overall, I see it's significant difference between the upside and the value on Seattle in pretty much any market, like even the win total. I mean, I don't really like to bet win totals this story, but they're 8.5. I have them over that. So yeah, I like Seattle. I have a lot of respect for Sean McVay. Sounds like Stafford will be back, and they'll have Cup back, and then they had a lot of injuries. But this defense for the Rams, I can't I can't believe people aren't talking about this more. Like this Rams defense, I don't remember ever seeing a defense gutted like this in all my years watching the NFL, to where you lose essentially your entire starting unit. And it's just all guys now that are they were backups or they were day 3 picks or they're undrafted guys that you're essentially going to count on, or these special team types. It could be really bad.
Yeah. We also don't it's how much confidence do we still have in Stafford? Eventually he's going to hit that Matt Ryan wall. He's a lot of miles on that arm, and then a recent injury. So I mean, if he's just not the same, we saw it happen quickly with a guy like Matt Ryan. There's still questions on that offensive line as well. So who knows how quick you're down to Brett Rippon or Stetson Bennett. But yeah, the defense
Carson Wentz.
Yeah, Carson Wentz.
They're working him out.
So yeah, a lot of questions with the Rams. I agree. I think it's all about Seattle.
Yeah, Arizona, like I gotta let it go a little deeper because like they're at 4.5 wins on the total, and yeah, they're gonna be bad, but like some of the, like for example, like their defense to me looks better than the Rams is. On offense, if who's gonna start for Murray, because like if you don't trade Hopkins, you still got Hopkins, Brown, Moore, Ertz, Connor, like a pretty decent tackles. Like we've seen Colt McCoy win games for them in the past. So, and they'll have a better coach than Cliff. So like, I'm not ready to just go all in on fading Arizona because like I actually think they might end up showing value on over if it's 4.5. Just
my fear is though that they're going to tank it like indirectly in that like these pieces, like a guy like Ertz and Baker, like they're going to be moved at some point. And like that's one of the reasons what they did in the draft this year, and they just want to compile picks. They know this is a throwaway year, so I would be fearful of like, okay, what does that mean for when Murray comes back, and then what does this mean for guys like Hopkins and do they even make it for the whole season? Because I would agree with you, just on the surface, then it seems too low. But this is a team that might just be completely okay. From everything I heard, it's like Gannon and the organization knows this year means nothing. And it's all about the draft next year. And then, especially when you have that Murray injury where he's not going to be ready for maybe half the year already. So that would be my fear with Arizona going over, because they might just end up all those key pieces. Their defense might end up looking like the Rams.
Yeah.
At one point, and then they might just hold Murray out until after the bye, and he's just playing the last 4 weeks. So that would be my fear there. But yeah, I think as of right now, the most reliable team in that division is Seattle.
Yeah, and if the more Arizona tanks, it just makes those 2 games easier for Seattle. But yeah, like right now, I got the Seattle division over. I have them projected over their win total. If I just not really don't have really much urgency to bet win totals at this point of the year. But yeah, I think the Cardinals, I'm kind of in wait and see mode because I don't want to jump the gun. If I do end up fading them, because right now I actually would show value over for them. And then the Rams is the team I kind of want. I'm probably going to end up fading, but like you said, want to see what's going to happen with the Cardinals, what's going to happen with the Niners a little bit, because that could factor in as well. Because if they get a couple division wins, that kind of changes things. But yeah, Seattle or nothing. All right, that is going to do it for our NFC 2023 schedule release podcast. Be sure to check out our AFC episode, which is out right now. We'll also have some Preakness stakes betting previews later this week. And you can find Stuck on Twitter at Stucky2. You can find me at Chris Raybon, and you can find us at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this money.